Thank you again, everyone, coming back. You know what Tina's rules of the house are, or Tina's house rules are about the preciseness of a question. So I know you've had a very long day and people are very tired, I know. So we'll try and get through this as reasonably quickly as we can. If any of your questions are specifically directed to either of them, it's okay. Please say that, but sort of they will take it in turns, okay? Okay. Should we start with group? I try and mix the numbers up, but I'm too tired. Let's start with group 1. Who is the perfect? Thank you.
What would you add?
Mike?
What would you add to the formation of priests, religious lay people to support their development, integrative development, so that they can become good accompaniers? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something I think about a lot, and a few things that I think of right away, especially in terms of priests in seminary, is education about the power differential that exists between a priest and a parishioner, or someone that they are supporting, and really trying to help priests understand how seriously they need to take that role, and the fact that, you know, the way that they use their power can either be for great good or great harm. And I think that a lot of priests maybe don't see the power that they hold kind of inherently because we give it to them as lay people often. And I would also say that I would love to see a greater awareness of trauma, the basic principles of trauma, how trauma works in the brain, and just how we can accompany people who have experienced trauma in a very specific way. And then I would also say religious trauma in particular is a really important thing for anyone working in the church, and really all people in the church, to understand why certain things might be so difficult, so that we can approach people's limitations or with compassion rather than judgment. So those are a few things I think of. I could talk about that for a long time, but do you have thoughts? Or
first thing that came to my mind when I heard the question is, to accompany anyone, first of all, we need to understand how I am affecting the other person. So, whether it is priest, a religious woman, or a lay person, and as Sara rightly said, the power dynamics are there in the church given to the positions where we are. And so very much is needed, that awareness, understanding of that power dynamics. Along with that, a sensitivity of heart, where we understand how am I affecting the other person. Because in our interpersonal relationships, I think all of us want to be a good person, basically. So if that is my goal of life, is that happening between both of our communication and interaction? So I think first thing, that awareness, then the rest. I can confirm with what she said.
Thank you very much. Group 2.
First and foremost, thank you all for your presentation. Oh, thank you. My name is Janet, and I'm from Uganda. I'm a survivor myself, and I've learned a new word, accompanying survivors of sexual violence, so as well. And our question goes directly to Sister Tresa. You talked about cultural dynamics in relation to women, how women are treated, and certain things are not accepted by culture, like divorce or speaking out and stuff like that, which is quite similar to where I come from. And because of that, I face a lot of backlash from the society as someone who is encouraging women to be disobedient and not to be submissive and to be strong-headed. How do you deal with that back in your country? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. See, for me, it is my personal understanding of the dynamics, so others may differ. As long as I want to be, all of us, I think, all of us want to be known as a good person, a good woman. So as long as I want, when that is very strong in me, then I begin to respond to the expectations of others. So all these things, actually all of us know that gender is constructed by the culture. So it is a culture that defines how a man has to behave, how a woman has to behave. So now as we are growing up, as we are becoming adults, and as we are becoming purposeful about our own lives, then comes the question, with these expectations, what is the outcome of my life? So that's where many of these survivors, because all of their suffering was that they are not fitting into the expectations of the culture. So once they have separated, okay, gender is created, man is like that, and a lot of jealous and anger towards men because they are enjoying more freedom, more this, more that, and all that. But now you are woman enough, adult enough, take your life into your hands. Now a choice to be made, what is important for me to be put into that characteristics of a good woman, or own my own life and raise above the others' opinions, gather myself, move forward.
Thank you. Okay, group 3, thank you for that reply.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentations. We had a lot of emotional responses. Our question is following on, Sara, from what you said about abuse happens in isolation, but healing happens in community. We agreed, but also felt that communities can be complicit if they don't take appropriate action or if they don't take responsibility for safeguarding. So the question is, what can we do to put preventive measures in place in our communities to prevent abuse from occurring again?
Thank you for pointing out that reality that communities can be not only places of healing, but places of great danger. I wish I had all the answers to what we can put in place. I think that's probably what we're all here trying to figure out. I guess something that I think about a lot, because in some ways I'm a leader of a community, and I think about how do we make sure that we have systems in place to hold people accountable, especially people who are in charge? And how do we make sure that we create a culture within an organization that it is okay, and in fact it is encouraged to ask questions and challenge the people in charge? And I think we'd all be our church, our organizations, our communities would all be safer if we worked really hard to not only have procedures in place, but also to have a culture change in which people who have great authority are held to a very high standard of accountability, and every person engaged, their voice matters, and when they raise concerns, that matters. So not to minimize the importance of all the policies that really are important, but I really think that deep change of culture is the real key to preventing abuse in all of its forms.
Thank you. Group 4. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We took a lot from both of your presentations and discussed them at some length. We also discussed the complexity around cultural patterns and messages in the church, especially leading with the word forgiveness. From your experiences, how does the journey towards forgiveness inform your practice in the context of survivor accompaniment?
Personally, I never insist on forgiving anybody because already the person is pressured, suffering, and again, I stepwise I presented, but the path was not rosy path. Even as they are reclaiming themselves, there were stones, there were thorns. So already their process of healing itself also is very challenging process they are entering into. So I personally never insist upon anyone to forgive anyone. But at the same time, I help them to realize how not forgiving affecting their own self. How they are breeding, how they are creating negative consequences in their own psyche, in their own personal lives. Then I'll ask them, you make a choice. And most of the time, their genuine answers are, yes, sister, we want to forgive, but right now I'm not ready. Fine, take your own time.
Thank you very much. It's a good question, and we could talk for hours, but we're not going to talk about forgiveness for hours. Okay, Sara, go on.
Sorry.
Make it short, please.
Sorry, I have a lot of thoughts on this too. That was really beautiful. I would just add that, especially in the context in which I'm addressing, the fact is that that the idea of forgiveness has been weaponized against many survivors as really an order to keep silent. To forgive and move on, meaning don't do anything, don't call anyone to account. And so I think I have to recognize that context, that that someone might react to the word forgiveness with that in mind when it has been used against them. And so I, like Sister Tresa, I never asking anyone to forgive, telling anyone they should forgive, and recognizing that it's a journey that many people choose to go on, and that needs to be their choice, and we support those who do, and also walk alongside those who say, I'm not interested in forgiving, or I am not ready right now, which is the thing I hear a lot. So that'll be all I'll say.
Brilliant, thanks very much. Group 5.
Again, thank you. Our question or questions are, what can we do about a culture of denial, specifically in an institutional level, the church or a school system? And how can we encourage or mandate bishops to listen and to accompany survivors?
Fairly straightforward then, particularly the second one. Okay.
I think my short answer is I don't know. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I do think there's power in building relationships and with say bishops, and in some ways trying to convey that those of us who are advocating with and for survivors are not against the church, but are actually doing this with and for the good of the church. But I don't really know how to bring about that change, except for I do really believe in the human connection and the power of hearing people's stories in detail and firsthand, and humanizing. I think it's it's much easier to dismiss someone when you haven't seen their name and their face and heard their story. So we place a lot of hope in that. But I know that there's a lot more that we need to do to figure out how to do this better.
Yes. Yeah, from Sara, from yesterday onwards, we are hearing that it's not only outside and even within the church, a lot is happening. And it's a genuine question and very difficult to answer. But personally, I feel hopeful. Looking at now, the levels of conversations that are happening in this room itself. Now we are bold enough to share in a safe quarters. And now we have budding safeguarding professionals coming up. And I feel hopeful with all these new initiatives. Surely a day will come where we can confront one another boldly, and situations will be created where people who has to accept. So now I think the first step, breaking the silence, is happening. So seeing that happening, I feel hopeful. A day will come where we can comfortably answer to this question.
Thank you very much. Group 6. Simon's getting his exercise in, and Isabella's having a well-deserved rest.
Thank you. It was such a stimulating presentation around trust, betrayal, humility, and much more. My question, though, this comes from the group, as safeguarding from within the church often presents a dilemma of both advocating for survivors and the pain and loyalty to their church. How, and particularly Sarah, but how have you bridged this? Just an easy question.
Yes, you all ask really good and really difficult questions that I feel like are the things I wrestle with all the time. I think I would return partly to what I said just a moment ago, is that when I am advocating alongside survivors, that is loyalty to the church. They are the church. And so for me, that has been really important to remember, because there can become a thing where we feel like this is somehow opposed or against, and that's just not the case. And in fact, for me, I take it back to the core teachings of Jesus, and he made very clear that he was that he stood with and called us to stand with those who are marginalized, vulnerable, hurt by religious leaders. He was pretty clear about that. And so for me, that's the core of what the church is. And I would also say that it's important to recognize that those who have been harmed in the church, that the church is not simply bishops and priests and buildings, that we are the church, the body of Christ. And so when I gather with a group of survivors in a circle, and people talk about, occasionally we'll start talking about the church in terms of the church doesn't listen, the church only causes more harm, et cetera. And sometimes we remind one another, well, this here right now, the 7 of us on this Zoom meeting, we are the church too, and we are listening, we are standing with one another. So it's a complex question. That's a very short answer to what I'm thinking.
By the end of your question, one thing that came to my mind is, several times we encounter some situations, and many times I personally will block it. Maybe we need to have courage to allow that to confront us. What is most important, being loyal to church or being loyal to God? I agree with all that. All of us are body of church and part of church. Everything I agree with, and that's what I also speak in catechism and tell everybody. But when things come up, where is our loyalty? Is it loyalty to God or loyalty to the church? I think that's where we need to confront ourselves and take a stand.
Thank you very much. That was both very powerful answers. Number 7.
The question was just answered, because we had a similar question So how can we defend the church in light of abuses? So, but I think you already answered. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Thomas. 8.
Thank you, Sister and Sarah. Our group walked away with a lot of hope from both of your presentations. In accompanying survivors in your context, we're guessing that you've encountered people who are very angry. They come across with a lot of anger, or they're facing re-traumatization, maybe in their journey with you. Can you share an experience of someone who has approached you with anger and how you've learned to handle that very personally yourselves and avoid any sort of re-traumatization? Thank you.
That's another good one. I guess it's really important to me to have an understanding that anger is an appropriate reaction to abuse and injustice. And so to not be afraid of anger, in fact, to welcome that as someone speaking truth and the emotion that comes with it. And so as personally, it's been a journey for me to learn how to sit with someone's anger, to not feel as a practicing Catholic who loves the church, to recognize the place that the anger is coming from and to be willing to receive it. And I would also say to be willing to receive it on behalf of the church. Many times these survivors had not had an opportunity to express those emotions towards the person who abused them or towards a bishop who covered it up, or they have not had a chance to share that anger. And so it needs to go somewhere, and maybe they share it in therapy, but sometimes they need to share it with someone who represents the church for us to receive it and say, I hear you, and it is okay to be angry. It is right that you are angry, and I am angry with you. And then also to have a discussion about how do we make our anger productive rather than destructive. And that's something we'll say bring up in a survivor circle. It's been a topic that we've raised, and invite people to share how do they make sure that their anger is something that, again, feels healthy and leads them to good action perhaps, rather than getting stuck in a cycle of anger that isn't leading you anywhere. But mostly I think my experience is just learning to accept it and validate it as the appropriate response to what they've been through.
Yeah, as Sara said, anger is inappropriate. Anyone. Now, when someone insults us, then immediate response is anger. When we think somebody insulted. So now, depending upon the number of years they have carried the trauma, and anger also proportionately increases. So there is no shock because they will be angry, and sometimes I use the term rage. There was a rage in them. So very strong anger. But ultimately we help. I'm talking about from psychology, being a psychologist and accompanying them. There is, on all this in psychology, we speak about a backlog of anger. We gather the anger over the years. So this is a psychological process where we help them to express it and reduce the intensity of anger in the system. Then we teach them, that's what, appropriate and responsible ways of expression of anger. And so for that, we have to build the emotional stamina of the person to hold the anger. Otherwise, what happens is, generally, in expression from submissive, we move to aggression. Then slowly, by training ourselves, we have to bring ourselves to assertion, where we understand the context and express the anger appropriately, holding the intensity in our own container. It's a training. But anger is very, very genuine and appropriate emotion.
Thank you very much. And finally, Group 9. Thank you.
Group 9 wanted to ask, can you tell us the most important thing to do and the most important thing not to do when we hear a story of abuse?
I think the most important, if I could boil it down to maybe not one, but a few things, is to receive without judgment and to listen without trying to give advice or tell someone what you think will help them, what they should try to do, what your opinions are about their situation, to really, in those first encounters, to just listen and use simple affirming statements like, I'm so sorry that happened. I believe you. Thank you for sharing this with me. What can I do to support you? Very simple things, very simple questions to let them take up the space in the conversation. And I think that probably tells you all the things not to do as well. Just don't do the opposite of those things. And I guess one of the hardest things can be, I would say, don't make it about you in that moment. Now, if you're hearing something really hard, when I hear really hard things, I might need to talk about them and the way they make me feel with someone, with my own therapist, with my husband. But in that moment, it's not my place to take up the space with my own thoughts, opinions, feelings, reactions. So that's some initial thoughts.
Yeah, in short, what Sara said is like, don't get shocked. Don't get shocked. Listen to it as one of the human experiences. Most of the time in counseling context, I have come across people, when they begin to share, they will begin telling, sister, I think I am going to share with you something you never heard. Or if I share with you what I really had gone through, you may get shocked. Then I tell them, okay, you share. Let me see whether I get shocked. Or I will let you know whether I am hearing from you the first time. So don't get shocked, and that's where our attitude is very important. Plus non-judgmental, as she correctly put, like don't tell, is it? Really? So this type of things will put them off, like, no, oh my God, it looks like something which no one else on earth had gone through. Why at all did I open my mouth? They will be beating themselves again. So we need to be open to listen to any experience, non-judgmentally, and then connect with the persons, and as you are journeying, then we will understand more.
Thank you very much. I've got two times.